And welcome back to Hannity. Now, not surprisingly, the mainstream media's coverage of Israel's offensive against the Hamas terrorists in Gaza is far from fair and balanced. And now even some politicians are showing their anti-Israeli bias. Now, Fox and Friends First co-host Ainsley Earhardt, she's standing by tonight at the Hannity Big Board to explain. Ainsley.
Hi, Sean. Yeah, we have some examples to prove all of this. Well, heavy fighting continued today between Israel and Hamas, as you know. Today marked day 16 of this conflict, and with no hope for a ceasefire anytime soon, politicians, the media, and even members of the Obama administration are constantly addressing the situation. But it is not all in defense of Israel. Take a look at a few of our examples that we found just from this week alone.
When you look at what's happening right now in Gaza, this is a massive massacre and one epic series of war crime after war crime.
It's unfortunate that we can hear Israeli spokespeople who are speaking on behalf of a military force that is inflicting massive civilian casualties on the ground, stand here in front of your viewers and essentially blame the victims for their own deaths.
I do believe Israel can do more to avoid the types of civilian casualties that we've seen in recent days. We've been heartbroken at the loss of Palestinian life, the loss of children. So we do believe that Israel has to take greater care to avoid those types of civilian casualties.
You've seen the widely chronicled story of the boys on the beach in Gaza who were killed. How does it strike you as a father?
And Sean, there have been some recent headlines that have caught our attention as well, including this from Yahoo. Casualty numbers raise questions about war in Gaza. And then there's this one from Al Jazeera. Gaza under heavy attack despite truce efforts. And from the Huffington Post, Mideast conflict 2014, Israeli military pummels Gaza, sending thousands of residents fleeing. We are also witnessing an anti-Israel bias beyond the United States. Earlier this morning, the Turkish prime minister had this to say.
Look, let me respond to this comment of Israel with one particular thing. 1, who finances Israel? 2, Israel is a terror state. They are creating a wave of terror with what they're doing now.
Well, we will, of course, continue to watch the coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict in the days and in the weeks to come. Sean, back to you.
All right, Ainsley, thanks so much. And for more reaction, we bring in author of the New York Times bestseller for the past 9 months, Things That Matter, our good friend, Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer. You know, Charles, I'm having a hard time, a really hard time understanding this president and those that do not have the moral clarity to understand that Israel is a victim of terror, surrounded by one enemy after the other that wants to destroy them. To me, this is about American values as well as the values of freedom for the Israelis. And so many people, including the president, don't get it, Charles. Help me out. Why?
Well, look, in the mainstream press, in the world press, you really are looking at an Orwellian universe. Does anybody tell you that a week ago, before the ground incursion, Egypt offered a ceasefire? The Israelis immediately accepted it. Hamas said no. There would have been no ground incursion at all had Hamas simply accepted the ceasefire. That's a fundamental fact. It didn't happen in 1948. That's not ancient history. This is last week. You go back just one more week. Who began this? Does anybody imagine that Israel has any interest in a cross-border war with Gaza, that it would be invading Gaza willy-nilly for no reason, endangering its troops? It's already lost about 30 soldiers. Israel has absolutely no desire to do that. And then you hear talk about the Israeli occupation. Does no one remember that 9 years ago Israel pulled out of Gaza, taking out all the settlements, all the military, everything it had in place? There is not a single settler, not a single soldier, not a single Jew left in Gaza. And does anybody remember, or does anybody report, that when the Israelis left, they left 30,000 greenhouses where they grew flowers and fruit for export and gave it to the Gaza Palestinians, wanting to encourage economic development, open commerce, and peace. And what did they get? The Palestinians have spent 9 years turning Gaza instead of into a free Palestinian state, into a terror camp with rockets, mortars, and tunnels. That's where all the cement went. That's where all their effort went. That's where all the money went.
Charles, I find this morally inexplicable to me. You have Israel as a beacon of freedom, an outpost of liberty. And what are they surrounded by? Ruthless, genocidal dictators and terrorist groups. I can run through the names and the lists of them, dedicated to their destruction. Even this very day, we have the grand poobah in Iran talking about wiping Israel off the map again. What would we do in this country if 2,000 rockets were fired into our cities? What would we do if 3 American students were kidnapped and murdered in cold blood by a group, a neighboring group? What would we do? To me, this is a simple equation, but the president doesn't seem to have that moral clarity. What is wrong with him?
Look, I would put the weight of this not on the president. I would put it on the media. I would put it on the reporters. I would put it on world opinion. I mean, look at the demonstrations that you had in Europe. Those are blatantly anti-Semitic. Even the president of France had to admit that behind it was anti-Semitism. We know that anti-Zionism is the way in polite society that you can express your anti-Semitism. There are 2 causes of the bias, of the Orwellian discourse. Number one, particularly in Europe, less in the U.S., but particularly in Europe, this is rank, centuries-old anti-Semitism, simply with a veneer of anti-Zionism. They attack Jews, they attack synagogues, they hurl epithets and insults from hundreds of years ago from the Middle Ages. This is raw, rank anti-Semitism, which continues. There was a 50-year hiatus in Europe out of shame over the Holocaust where you weren't allowed to be anti-Semitic. That is over. We are now back to where we were. The second reason, and the more prevalent one among the American media, is simple, rank ignorance. They don't know the story. They do not know the history I just talked about a few minutes ago. They don't know what Israel offered Gaza, what it offered the West Bank. Do you ever hear anybody report that when Israel left Gaza 9 years ago unilaterally, at the same time it dismantled 4 settlements in the West Bank? That was a signal from Ariel Sharon that he wanted to eventually leave all the territories and live in peace with the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. But you never hear that. And let me ask you this, Sean. Outside of Fox, how many news outlets have reported that the United Nations agency in Gaza has found in not 1 but 2 schools rockets? Now, you tell me, Sean, if you try to smuggle 20 rockets into your old high school and you put them in a classroom, do you think no one in the school would have known? The UN workers who run the schools know about this. They collaborated with Hamas. And has anybody reported what they did when they found the rockets? They turned them over to Hamas, which will be used to kill innocent Jews.
And by the way, the American government is giving that coalition Palestinian Hamas government taxpayer dollars, just like we gave President Morsi, the former head of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. We're making this is a very scary time to see so many people lined up on the wrong side of morality here. Charles Krauthammer, good to see you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sean.